When I was growing up, I was told rich people were bad, that there was no way that they could understand the problems that we were going through when we were poor, that rich people problems aren't the same as poor people problems, that they don't experience problems the way that poor people do, that they could solve all the issues in the world with their money, but they choose not to. And I think I truly believed that for a long time, for years growing up until I was well into my adulthood. So I started a marketing business a few years ago, and then I went into some of these meetings at the chambers of commerce, and I started meeting and rubbing elbows with some of the people that were actual millionaires. When I was a kid, I thought that somebody that was a millionaire if you owned a house in the suburbs. You got a dog that you take to the vet regularly every year, you're rich. You got a fence around your backyard that's made out of wood, you're rich. You got a driveway that doesn't get buried under 3 inches of mud when it rains, you're rich. But since I've been able to get around people that have a lot of money, that are very wealthy, and of course everybody dreams about getting wealthy at some point in their life, right? Everybody that's not a millionaire is a millionaire to be in the future. At least that's how we see it. Historically, people that have had a lot of money, I don't think they get a lot of great credit, and for good reason. Historically, people who have had a lot of money have not given that money to another organization or something where that money could actually do some good. Pour it back into the people that need, instead of pouring back into the people that have and giving them more, and to where most of the wealth in the world is accumulated within a few different families. All the while, there are so many people in our population across the United States alone that are dealing with impoverishment, of course, but there's also food insecurity. But not to get on top of a soapbox for that, the real question I've always asked myself was, can real change happen if you make money? Does money change you once you're poor and then you gain it? And then what do you do once you have that money? Do you pour back into the people that you actually lived with before? And vice versa. If you were born into money, can you be a person that gives to the people that need that money? And the answer to both is sort of, it happens and it doesn't happen. It kind of matters on the individual. It kind of matters on the things that happen in that person's life. So as far as I've been concerned, the Wolfe Street Red Carpet Gala has been the top tier event for people in recovery across the state of Arkansas, or in this part of the South. People come in from all over the place, and they get dressed up in their best gala clothes and then go take photos with each other. Everybody looks, of course, really great, really fancy, nice designer clothing. There's nice jewelry. So I've seen the pictures, and since I've been exploring recovery over the past, 2 years now, and just trying to learn what recovery is, what are the issues that follow recovery, what are some of the solutions that are being provided now, and how do we create a sustainable future from what works now? I've been so focused on that that there are other places within the recovery world that I also like to explore. Earlier this year, I went to my very first sober New Year's Eve party. I went to my first sober New Year's Eve party earlier this year, and that was fantastic. I had a great time. I was taking photos the whole time, but that's my thing. So I figured, what better way to find out what this part of recovery is than to be there myself? And so I reached out, I asked if I could cover the event, and Justin Buck at Wolfe Street gladly obliged me, and I really appreciate you. Thank you, Justin, for inviting me out and allowing me to come in as press. Before I talk about this type of event, I want you to know that I'm not saying anything as criticism. They're just observations. So anything here, it was a lovely event. I loved it. I loved the outcomes. Spoiler alert, I loved it. I loved everything that was happening about it. But it doesn't mean that I didn't tussle with a lot of things mentally while I was there. As a kid that grew up dirt poor, suddenly being surrounded by a good mix of people that were born into wealth, had accumulated wealth, and then the other half of the people that were there were people in recovery. So it was kind of a really strange environment to be in, to see both sides come in together and to mingle together. So starting from the top, I came in, I thought this was a gala. So everybody was going to be dressed to the nines, and that means that I should do that too. I'm not really sure what the dress code is for press. So if I'm going to a gala, I'm gonna do it up. I'm gonna wear one of my fancy blazers. Turns out it was a little too much. I got a little too much attention. I should have taken it off. Next time I'll know better, If we're going somewhere that someone else dresses nice, I need to downplay it just a couple of pegs. But it was nice to be able to sort of slide through the crowds. I had my fancy camera holsters that I had just gotten, and I was really, really excited to start using that with the camera on each side of my hip. I could pull it out and I could get my long shots, I could get my short shots, and do filming at the same time. Usually when I go to these recovery events, I'll see a few faces that I know very well because I've run into them so many times running in the recovery circuit. But this time, it took a while. It took a while to see some familiar faces. Of course, I saw some of the Wolfe Street people there because they were hosting the event. But other than that, there were a lot of people that were coming in that were associated with the upper class of Little Rock and Central Arkansas, the area. The people that I consider to be of a completely different type of person than what I am. That's not meant to be offensive. That just comes from the mentality that I've been raised and primed to see things as. Right off the bat, when you go inside of the gala itself, there was a large entry room. And by the way, this is a venue that I've been to a few times. It's really cool because I've been to different Halloween parties, and that's what I know it as. And so it felt like stepping to a haunted house that somebody else had retrofitted to be a really fancy ball. And honestly, I think we should be doing that to more haunted houses, or mix the two. So when you first go in, there is the entry table, of course. There's a little area where people can wait. But then the first big room that you pass through was a silent auction. And the auction items were way outside of my range. So right off, I know that the people that they're targeting here are either the type of people that can pay this, or they were outrageously overbidding already on these items. I got some photos, and some people like to be shot, some people don't like to be shot. One of the strangest things I've noticed in the recovery field as an outsider, just as purely observational, when I go around with my camera, which I'm never without my camera, I'm always going into events. I'm always filming and taking photos, and you better believe I'm taking candid shots because those are the best shots. I will take my camera and I will start taking pictures in a room, and you'll have those that notice the camera and then they'll start straightening up a little bit, and they'll do a little pose, which is it's fine. I prefer when people don't know I'm there at all and I get natural photos. But then you have the others that will notice the camera and they will run. They don't want to be seen. They'll have a full golden sequin dress on, really nice scarf around the shoulders, hair all done, makeup completely done. I mean, it looks like they're walking out because they're ready to be a model. And now, when they see the first camera, they shy away. It's something strange that resonates from the recovery field, and I think I don't honestly know what that is. It's something psychological, I'm sure. It probably has something to do with the part of running for so long where you don't feel like you fit in. There is definitely a part of psychologically, feeling like you don't fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in, but I was faking it. And then along with this room of these really high-priced items, it was like walking around in a museum. There was a cocktail bar that wasn't making alcoholic drinks, I don't think. I think it was a mocktail bar, but I'm not sure. I do know, side note, if you've never been to one of these events where they're doing a fundraiser for any kind of nonprofit, no matter if it's a recovery or not, some recovery organizations will make sure it's a mocktail bar because the people that are there are in recovery. So they don't want to tempt you. They don't want to put any triggers in front of you or tempt you to drink. But there are other recovery organizations, and there are lots of other nonprofit organizations that have no qualms about alcohol being there. They'll even have a special drink of the night, branded just for them. And the point is that if you drink enough of this drink, if you drink enough alcohol, and you got enough money in your bank account, you can take that money out of your bank account more freely because you feel good, And so by the time we have this live auction, you're in competition with somebody else. It's all good fun, and you're not really that conscious of what you're doing. And so you're freed of a few dollars, but it goes to something good. You may wake up with a little bit of a headache, but not as much regret on what you spent your money on. The next room was the photography room, where there was a step and repeat banner. There were two different ends of that. They had a professional photographer there. And people were really gathered up and getting their photos. If they were together from a different recovery organization, they all gathered up and had their photos taken together. If there were people that ran together back when they were addicted to their substances, and now they're in recovery, they gathered those people up, they gathered strangers up. But then you would see the ones that are coming in that have no connection, with quotes around that, to anyone with substance use problems, right? And so this is a good deed night. This is another type of person. So the good deed night person comes out because they want to be philanthropic, right? And so there's a competition between you and all these other philanthropic people that have a lot of money. It can be friendly, it can be dirty, it can mean nothing to you, or it can mean the world to you. Either way, this is where I start diverting away from the thought that I had of rich people can't be good. Rich people can be good. Rich people can do good. I've seen that. But in this situation, this has created a situation where no matter if you're there for a good purpose or the wrong purpose or no purpose, your money is still being spent and it's all going to the same place, which is saving some of these recovery services that are being available. Early this year, a lot of funding was cut federally from the administration that's in place right now. And so they've got to be able to make up that money somehow. If money is being taken, if it takes one night of schmoozing and rubbing elbows, of schmoozing and rubbing elbows with the Richies, of schmoozing and rubbing elbows with the people that have a lot of money in order to get funding for your program, then so be it. You've gotten that money. You're not selling your soul. Yeah, it feels cringy sometimes whenever you go into these situations like that. I didn't feel that here. I felt like the majority of people were genuine about their response and their desire to be there and to help fund and to hear stories about recovery and know that there is hope. I think that everyone, of course I've said this a billion times on my podcast, but over time, I've realized, pretty early on, after doing a few episodes, that even if you have never had any kind of addiction issues, you've had some sort of issues that you need recovery from. Recovery is not a word that is exclusive to addiction. It's a word that is exclusive to anyone who has anything to get over, right? To come down and to heal from. So that's everyone. And putting these expectations on people just because they have money and immediately dismissing them is not healthy. I'll say that first. I'm not preaching to you, I'm preaching to me right now. But if you feel that way, so then I went on and I caught a lot of different photos from around the room. There was a live painting being done that was going to be auctioned off at the end. And I knew that one of the local news anchors here, Kevin Kelly, he's really well respected and somebody that you wouldn't think of whenever you think of anybody having problems, right? So Kevin Kelly was supposed to be telling his story for the first time, and we didn't know what it was going to be ahead of time. Had no idea that he was going to get up there and what he was going to say. People go up, there's a promo video that's played, there are some speakers that come up. Laura Monteverde is another local anchor, and for some reason that's not clear to me yet, she is very pro-recovery, and she has gone out of her way to cover some of the recovery sources that are available in Arkansas and makes it a regular series on the actual news here. So kudos to her, appreciate her. She did say she was going to cover long-term at one point and never heard back from her, but we don't hold it against her. After a few of the stories were told, Kevin Kelly finally got up and started talking about his story. And I think, I was hearing what he was saying, but at the same time, I was mentally going through this thing of like my whole belief system, right? That I was raised on when I was a kid. Because it is something that I have to check every once in a while. I think that it's important to take ideas that you think are truths, test them, and see if they're actual truths. And that's important. Don't just say, this is my truth. No, that's stupid. It doesn't get you anywhere, and it kills your growth. And so it also makes you outside of reality whenever you do that.
So let me begin my speech by telling you exactly who I am. My name's Kevin, and I'm a recovering drug addict. Kevin. I forgot to set the timer, so bear with you. Laura just laid and shut me down. This is the part where you put on your seatbelts and hold on tight. My goal tonight is to share my experience, strength, and hope as it pertains to my drug addiction. It's also to try and reach the alcoholic or the drug addict who's still suffering and to let them know they're not alone and there is a way out. I should not be standing here in front of you tonight. In fact, I'm amazed I'm even alive, because when I look at my past actions, I should have either ended up in jail or I should have died from an overdose. It's important to note that behind every alcoholic and drug addict, in my opinion, is usually a story of excruciating pain, abuse, neglect, and trauma. The chains of addiction are heavy, they're internal, and they're invisible at first. They restrain and attack the mind first, and then they attack the body. Dr. Gabor Mate, he's an internationally known physician, and he specializes in trauma and addiction recovery. He has a great question, and it's not why the addiction, but why the pain? I'm going to try and answer that question as best I can as it pertains to me. I grew up in San Diego, California. I was the youngest of 4 children. I don't remember why it happened, but when I was 4 years old, I woke up one morning and my dad was gone. My parents got a divorce, and I had no idea why. Then out of nowhere, a stepdad comes into the house. Between the time I was 4 years of age and 13, my 2 oldest sisters moved out to go live with my dad. Then my brother moved out. Then my stepdad moved out, leaving me as a 13-year-old boy all alone to take care of my mom, who at the time was depressed, emotionally bankrupt, working overnight as a nurse, and had an addiction to painkillers. I also had to take care of my 2 half-sisters, and both of them were still in diapers. I was 13 years old. I had been abandoned 5 times. And in my mind, I thought it was all my fault. I mean, why else would they leave? No one explained to me why. No one sat me down and told me I was going to be okay. And no one told me that it's not your fault. It left an invisible scar inside me, and I had no idea that it was just beginning to grow. So at 13 years old, I became the man of the house. I wanted to go live with my dad too, but how could I? If I left my mother, I thought for sure she would crumble, so I stayed. I would go to school, then to soccer practice, come home at around 5 p.m., and I would have a list of chores that had to be done. I had to make dinner for myself and my 2 half-sisters. Around 8 o'clock at night, I would try and do my homework. That was my life, and I just kept quiet. I accepted it. It was my normal. Somewhere along the way, though, I lost my self-identity, I lost my self-worth, I lost my voice, and I lost my childhood. That's why I turned to drugs. It's too much pain. First marijuana, my friends had access to it, and they offered it to me, and I wanted to fit in, and I didn't want to feel that pain anymore. Marijuana just didn't do it for me, and I didn't like it. Alcohol obviously was available to me as well, but I didn't like how it made me feel, and I certainly didn't like the hangovers. So again, I was lonely. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong to something or someone, and I didn't want to feel any of the pain that I was feeling. But what happened next changed my life forever. I played a lot of tennis when I was a kid. I was 13 years old at the time, and I would go down to the local high school to play tennis and just hit a ball up against the cement wall. On this particular day, an older man was about 2 or 3 courts down, and he was doing the same thing. He eventually walked over to me and said, "Hey, you want to go play some tennis out on the actual tennis court?" I wanted to be cool. I wanted to fit in. I said, "Sure." So we played tennis. We finished the match. And then out of the blue, he said, "Hey, you want to smoke a joint?" Again, wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong to something or someone. I said, "Sure." That's when he looked at me and said, "Well, I don't have it with me here right now. It's at my apartment, and I live right down the street." What happened next is hard to describe, but it destroyed me. All I remember is being in this apartment. It was dark, the windows were covered, there was music playing. We smoked a joint, and then I smoked another joint. And all I remember after that was feeling paralyzed from the head to toe. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't say stop. I couldn't scream out for help. And I couldn't fight back. I was dropped off at a corner, and I ran home as fast as I could. No one was there. I felt violated. I felt shame. I felt guilt. And once again, I felt it was all my fault. I'm a 13-year-old boy. All these emotions just rained down on me and exploded inside me. It was unbearable. I had no one to talk to. My mom was not there. She was, but she wasn't. I thought no one would understand or care. And I mean, they all left. Everyone left me because it was my fault, right? So I buried it all. The abandonment, the sexual abuse, the feelings of rejection, not being wanted, unloved, unwanted, everything. That's what it felt like. 3 years later, when I was 16 years old, I was at a friend's house, and a bunch of us were in the back room listening to music. Out of nowhere, I hear this. And I look over, and a friend of mine, and he is a friend today, he's clean, was chopping up some cocaine on this glass top. And he asked me if I wanted the wine. I didn't even know what cocaine was at the time, but I wanted to be cool and fit in, so I grabbed that straw and I sorted that line. And in a matter of seconds, I fell in love. And I knew at that moment there was no turning back. But unfortunately, there would be more trauma in my life. One night I was at the dining room table doing my homework, or at least trying to, and my mom came home, and she stood in the hallway, and I looked to my right, and she wouldn't look at me. I said, "Mom, look at me." And she wouldn't do it. I could tell she had been crying. And when she finally did look at me, I could tell that she had been hit. She had a bloody lip, a black eye, and I knew exactly who did it. I opened the front door, ran across the street to a house that my stepfather had purchased for his elderly mother. I kicked in the door, and I ran in there, and I looked him straight in the face, and I said, "If you ever fucking touch my mom again, I'm going to kill you." At the time, I meant it. But seeing the aftermath and the damage that physical and verbal abuse can cause to someone you love as a 16-year-old, it's like a bomb going off inside you. That's what it felt, but there's only one problem. I had no one to turn to. My mom was emotionally unavailable. No one would understand, and once again, it's my fault. So I crank up my cocaine use. All through high school, I did cocaine on a weekly basis. I was mowing yards and doing chores around the neighborhood so I could keep the party going, right? But at some point, whether you're an alcoholic or a drug addict like me, you cross an invisible line. You don't know when it happens, you don't know why, but once it happens, there's no turn back. And for me, that happened in college. When I got to college, I ended up making both the men's soccer and tennis team. We ended up being state champions in both sports the 2 years that I was there. So there was a lot to celebrate, and there was a lot of cocaine. My grades went in a downward spiral just like that. So I made a decision and I quit school. I returned to San Diego, and for the first time I actually moved into the house with my father to pursue my lifelong dream of becoming a professional soccer player. I was a goalie. I was a crazy one. So I tried out for the San Diego Sockers, and I was playing on the reserve team. I didn't have a contract, but then one day on my way to practice, an 80-year-old man T-bones my car and takes my back out, and just like that, my dreams were gone. Yet another thing taken from me, from my soul. So I took cocaine use to the next level. And here's why I use. It allowed me to escape from all of that emotional pain that I carried with me. I was able to handle the stress in my life, so I thought. It gave me a peace of mind, sense of control. It gave me instant warmth, safety, empowerment, things that I never felt as a young kid. But it was also the devil. Between the age of 18 and 24, my world would change even more. The devil and I were busy doing a tango, and boy, he was in control. My usage of cocaine turned into a nightmare. Sometimes I would use it one day for fun. Then there were days where I would just vanish. I'd be off the grid 2, 3, 4 days at a time. I tried to convince myself that this time would be different. There's the insanity and the thrill of the chase of getting it was like a drug itself. And with a switch in my head flipped, I was off to the races and no one could stop. My life began to spiral out of control. I lied to my family, my friends. I was unreliable. I was mean. I was angry. I was depressed. I was all alone. Inside, I was bankrupt, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and I didn't give a rat's ass. All I could think about was that next hit, that next line, and eventually caught up with me. One night, I was over at my girlfriend's house at the time, and my dad calls me and said 3 simple words: "Get home now." I knew it was Dad. So I walked into the house, and the first thing I noticed when I entered the kitchen was an envelope on the kitchen counter. And he said, "Tomorrow morning you will hop on a plane, you will fly to Minnesota, someone will pick you up at the airport and take you straight to the Hazleton Betty Ford Clinic." I just looked at him and said, "Okay, whatever." I went there for 30 days, and it was my first introduction to AA. It was my first introduction to the 12 steps. But during that 30-day period, I wore all the right masks and I said all the right things. 30 days later, I was out of there. But that devil that I was doing the tango with, still in my head. He wasn't gun free. I got back to San Diego and I was getting ready to actually go to an AA meeting because that's what I preferred. That's what I identified with. I just enjoyed it much more than NA. I was cleaning out my room at my dad's house, getting rid of old stuff, and I came across an old wallet, and I opened it up, and I'm throwing out max out credit cards, and all of a sudden a small bindle flies out and lands on the table in front of me. A small bindle. It's like a small envelope, and it holds cocaine. I took 2 steps back. I was in shock. I'm like, surely it's empty, because when I used cocaine, I used until there was no cocaine left. Took 2 steps forward, opened that bindle, and man, that thing was packed. Didn't hesitate. Took a line. 10 seconds later, another line. And then 10 minutes later, that cocaine was gone. And I still made a night to go to the meeting. Insanity. Of course, I never made it to the meeting. I pulled over to the nearest payphone, called up my dealer and said, "Hey, I'm back." And he said, "Awesome, come on over." I was off to the races once again. When I came back from Hazleton, though, my dad did tell me this. He said, "You relapse 3 more times under my roof, I'm going to kick you out." Didn't take long for that to happen. One day of heavy using, I was driving and I wanted more cocaine. I had to get that next fix. And I look in my rear view mirror and I see a car following me. I'm like, that's strange. I would turn right, it would turn right. I turned left, it turned left. And then I looked again in the rearview mirror and I see this guy and it looks like he's on a walkie-talkie and I'm like, shit. Cops. They're after me, man. turned around, went straight back to my dad's house, and I run into the house. I go into the bedroom, and I'm looking through the curtains. I'm like, they're out there. And I run out into the hallway, and my dad's there. I said, Dad, cops are here. They're right out there. In that gold car, you can see the guy. And I turn around and look at my dad, and he's speechless. I'd never seen my dad cry. Tears are rolling down his face. And he looked at me and he said, Son, there's no one out there. I said, what are you talking about? They're right there. Can't you see them? And once again, he looked at me and said, there's nobody out there. There's no car. And here's the insanity part of drugs and addiction. You would think that would be a wake-up call for me, that I would finally realize that I have a problem. Didn't even faze me. My dad was a man of his word. He kicked me out of that house. And it was one of the greatest things he ever did, and it was probably one of the hardest things he ever did. Think about it. As a father, the pain I must have put him through had to be unbearable. The anxiety I caused him, not knowing where I was or what I was doing. Was I in jail? Or was I in a hotel room dead? After he kicked me out, I ran straight to Mom. Now, she tried everything she could to get me off cocaine. Both my parents did. Didn't work. It had to be my choice, my decision, my time, and there had to be a rock bottom. March 22nd, 1989, literally the day before my birthday, I was in a hotel room. I had been on a 3 or 4 or 5 day binge. I was off the grid. Nobody knew where I was. The curtains were drawn. Everything was dark. I put a maxed out credit card on the doorknob because if somebody tried to enter the room, they would have to turn the doorknob and the credit card would fall and hit the tile floor below. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I can escape now. Talk about insanity. I was hunched up in a ball in the corner of the room. I could see people in black silhouettes walking back and forth. I was terrified, sweating profusely, thinking, this is how I'm going to die. I hadn't eaten a thing. I had lost probably 20, 30, 40 pounds. And then out of nowhere, red and blue lights light up this dark room. And I hear, come out with your hands up. I'm like, shit, this is it. I walked over to the door. I looked out the people. I could see cops out there that had the guns drawn. I closed my eyes, put my hands up, walked outside, opened my eyes, and there's no one there. But just as vivid as you can see me right now, and just as vivid as you can see the person next to you right now, that's how realistic this hallucination was. But in that brief moment, I had a spiritual awakening. In just a few seconds, I finally realized this is not the life I want to live. This is not why God put me on this planet. And I also realized that God was with me every step of the way, protecting me. I walked back in my room, I picked up the phone, I called my dad and said 2 words. I'm ready. The next day, he dropped me off at Rancho La Brea, a recovery center way out east of San Diego. I got there and it looked like a resort. I remember after the first week of being there, telling one of the counselors that this place is an absolute joke. He just looked at me and started laughing, and then he said, just wait. He was right. You see, from the time I was 4 up until the time I was 24 and had that spiritual awakening, I had stuffed every emotion you can imagine, all the sexual abuse, the abandonment, everything inside me into this balloon that just kept growing and growing and growing. And after about 2 or 3 weeks there, somebody somehow took that needle and just popped the balloon. all these emotions just poured out of me, and I cried for like days, but I realized the healing was just beginning. I stayed there for 3 months. I focused on the 12 steps. I did everything they told me to do, and I finally found the strength and courage to tell my mom and dad everything I felt growing up, including what happened to me when I was 13 years old. They were devastated. But it was cleansing. And for the first time in my life, I felt that heavy burden that I'd been carrying around on my back for 20 years finally being lifted off my back, but I knew I still had a lot of work to do. During the 3 months that I was there, some of us would be allowed to go off the compound, so to speak, to attend meetings outside. I was still in a daze and a fog, and then I went to a meeting in La Jolla, not far from San Diego. There were about 200 people there, and there was this elderly man leading the meeting, and he grabbed the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he opened it, he started reading something from page 83. He said, "If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom, a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear, people, economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves." It's a powerful message, especially for those of us in the program, and we know that to be the promises. Well, after the meeting, this elderly man walked up to me out of 200 people, and he said, "Come with me." We went out into the alley to have a cigarette, and he got right in my face, and I'm in, this guy is nuts. This guy is crazy. And he said, "You were the only one who was listening." And I'm like, he's real crazy. But then he said 3 words over and over and over again that changed my life. He said, "I promise you, I promise you, I promise you. If you do what I say and you keep coming back, all of your wildest dreams will come true." No one had ever promised me anything. It just hit me in the gut, and I wanted what he had. I wanted that sparkle in his eye, that inner peace. I wanted those promises to come true in my life. So Walter, right there, became my sponsor. An accountability partner who was on speed dial. A person I could count on to be there for me, to call me out my bullshit, to set me straight, to guide me and help me with life, with recovery, and with my inner demons. I'd call him every day, and he would give me assignments that I would do religiously. And after 3 months of Ransom Labrie, I had to make a choice. Go back out into the real world or go to a halfway house for another 6 months. I didn't trust myself, even though I had 3 months of sobriety at that time, so I went to the halfway house. And when I arrived, it was eye-opening. I mean, you saw people coming at you down the hallways of this recovery center, and I was like, what am I doing here? I'm thinking, I better turn around and run as fast as I can, because they looked like they were in a bike or a biker gang or members of gangs. They had rat sheets. They'd terrify you. Turned out they were some of the nicest people I've ever met, and we shared a lot in common. They too had invisible scars. They wanted to know what peace was like. They wanted the madness in the head to just stop. They wanted to feel loved, to be recognized, to be accepted. And so did I. The recovery center taught me how to be responsible for the first time in my life. I mean, there were rules that had to be followed, meetings that had to be attended, chores that had to be done to perfection. We had to have a job. We had a curfew. We had to attend meetings, and if you used or failed the drug test, you're out. That's it. I followed all the rules. And this time, I was not wearing a mask or saying all the right things. I spent most of my life, or free time, I should say, going to meetings and spending a lot of time with Walter. I met with him 2 to 3 times a week, one-on-one. We'd go over each of the 12 steps, word for word. That quality time and pouring over those steps changed my life forever. I'm not going to go through each one of the 12 steps that saved my life, but I am going to mention just a few of them before I wrap things up. Step one, as you might know, says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol or drugs and that our lives became unmanageable. The first word jumped out at me, we. It doesn't say I, it says we. Keep in mind, I'm still like 3 or 4 months sober, so I'm trying to figure all these words out and what they mean to me. But for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't alone. Admitting I was powerless over drugs or cocaine, that was easy. I had no problem with that. Step 2 said, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That was a hard word. I was pissed at God. I mean, what kind of God will put me through all that insanity? What did I do to deserve this? The pain, the misery, a heartache, a loneliness. But step 2 makes no mention of God. It says a power greater than ourselves. That I have to grab onto. Who has more power than I did? Well, the answer was simple. It was the people who attended the AA meetings. They had long-term sobriety under the belt. They had that sparkle in their eye that I wanted. People just like my sponsor, Walter. He always told me to stick with the winners. So I did. I showed up early to meetings. I volunteered to make coffee, got donuts. I spoke when I didn't want to. I saved lakes. I put up the chairs. I cleaned the tables. It was humbling, but necessary. Slowly but surely, I started to feel better about myself and my life. And then step 4 came around, which says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's a demanding step. It required me to finally be brutally honest with myself, and Walt and I spent months poring over that, going over the emotions, the feelings, the why, the how. It wasn't fun, but in the end, it was worth every tear I shed. With Walter's help and those who attended the AA meetings that I was at, I learned it wasn't my fault. I learned that I suffered a lot of trauma at a very young age. And the trauma was the roots of my addiction. I understood the more why I used cocaine. I learned that I suffered from PTSD, from being abandoned, from the sexual abuse, and some of the other experiences that I went through. Steps 8 and 9 scare me to death, but to find that serenity and inner peace, I had to do them. Step 8 says, made a list of all persons we harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. When I look at that step, it occurred to me that I might be one of the lucky ones, because when I used drugs, I was a loner. I did it all by myself. I didn't go out to bars. I went to a hotel. I was by myself. I went to a room. There was nobody else around. So the list of people I harmed wasn't as long as I thought it would be, but I still had to make amends to them all, which takes you to step 9. You make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. I apologize to everyone on the list. And to those I couldn't apologize to face, I wrote letters. The majority of them accepted the apology, but there were some that wanted no part of me, and I understood why. I also had to apologize to myself, to that little boy. And I told him that you are wanted, that you are loved, that you do deserve peace in your heart and your soul. And most importantly, it wasn't your fault. The road to recovery is never ending. There's always more work that needs to be done. And I should never forget the past or where I came from, because I could lose everything just like that. I love step 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. I do it daily. When I make a mistake, I try my best to own it. I try to hold myself accountable, to be a man of my word, honest and vulnerable. And when I make a mistake but hurt someone, I now have the courage and confidence to apologize for it. Am I following all these steps perfectly? No, but I try. My wife and kids know that. I'm still broken inside. I'm still healing. I'm still baffled and confused and have many flaws and triggers. I mean, there are days when I wake up depressed, unmotivated, or when it's a state of fear. In fact, there are times and moments when I have nightmares. and wake up feeling high on cocaine or even paralyzed, screaming, unable to move, just like that little boy, that 13-year-old boy. The difference, though, is now I had a team of warriors, that's for you, Donna, that are with me at all times. I have a loving and caring God that I turn to whenever I need him. I had an AA toolbox that I carry with me 24/7 that's packed with prayers and solutions. And on my phone, I have more than 50 fellow AA members that I can call anytime, no matter what, especially if I need to vent or if I'm in trouble. Before I wrap things up, and Laura, if I've gone long, I apologize. I do want to mention Step 12 because it answers and explains why I'm standing in front of you all for the first time sharing this story. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of besets who tried to carry this message to alcoholics and addicts, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. To keep this incredible and beautiful gift that I have been given, I have to give it back. Tenfold. I must never forget where I came from, what I've experienced, and how far I've come. I have to get it back because tonight as we speak, someone's struggling or know someone who is. AA saved my life. Recovery centers just like the Wolfe Street saved my life. And I will leave you with this final thought. The promises that I talked about, they do come true. I am now amazed. I now have a new freedom, a new happiness. I do not regret my past. I now have serenity and peace and no longer feel useless or alone. God is in my life and always has been. So if you're hurting, if you're lonely, and you can't stop the wheels of addiction from spinning in your mind, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and if you're tired of being in the dark and hurting yourself or others, I'm here to tell you there is hope. There is light on the other side. And I will add this. I may not know you. I may not know your story or the pain you might be feeling tonight. But I do know this. I care about you. I would not be here if I didn't. I am here for you. Everyone in this room is here for you. The Wolfe Street is here for you. All you have to do is say two simple words. I'm ready. And if you do that, I promise you, all of your wildest dreams will come true. Thank you.
So I took my ideas that I was growing, the ideas I was raised on, where if you have money, then there's no way that you could have problems like poor people do. And then listening to Kevin's story about how he grew up and the way that he had been involved with, different types of substances and issues that he had faced, privately without it being public, it kind of just made me realize how much someone can privately struggle without letting you know. Not everybody wears their addiction on their sleeve. Not everybody wears their divorce on their sleeve. Not everybody gets on social media and announces that they are going through some strong depression right now. Overall, the night was to benefit people who are going through recovery and to find common ground. And I think that's the main thing, is that we found the Venn diagram, we found the middle, and where we meet is that we all suffer from something and that we're all trying to heal from something. And to be judgmental of another person just because you haven't been what they've been through or you haven't lived in their circumstances doesn't help anything. It just reinforces those problems and it compounds them. So I do appreciate everyone that was there. It has nothing to do with me, but I do appreciate them either way, that they were willing to come, they were willing to meet there in the middle, that they could walk past a doorman that has a Viking haircut and braids and tattoos on his neck obviously somebody that's been in recovery, and treat them as an equal. And most of all, that the funding at the end of the night was going towards a great program. It was going towards a great cause, and it's filling in the gap where the government is failing us on the funding for needed programs. Honestly, didn't know where I was going to go with this when I sat down to record. And I've taken breaks several times, but I keep coming back to the same points. Did not mean to make this about my the way that I was raised. I would rather make content that is authentic than to just sit here and say, it was a wonderful event, everyone was blessed, amen, we went home. And so the reality is that we have issues, we have problems, there are things that make us all different, but being able to use that night as an example, let's find somewhere. Let's find a common ground. If we need to get dressed up and come to you, let's do that. If you need to dress down and then come to our area, fine, let's do it. I think the most important thing is being willing to meet in the middle on uncomfortable ground around people you would normally hang out with, to learn about them and their life, and to be sympathetic, to be kind. So that was my night at the Wolfe Street Red Carpet Gala. What did you guys think? Were you there? Were you not there? What do you think about these big, huge galas that happen that benefit recovery? Love to know your opinions, and let me know where I'm wrong. Listen, I don't grow unless I test those theories of what I believed in and see if they're true or not. It was a lovely night, and I met some lovely people. Got some photos of people that I reconnected with afterwards, and today it really has been, something that's been on my mind. Wanted to talk about it, wanted to bring it out, put it on the channel. But yeah, I want to know, what do you guys think about these big sort of gala events that benefit nonprofits like that? Do you like them? You ever been to one? One of my thoughts for a long time before going to one of these events was, yeah, you're going to give money for one night, but you're not going to volunteer at these organizations. You're not going to be boots on the ground. You're not going to get your hands dirty. But I realized that it takes all kinds of people and all kinds of contributions that are going to happen. Yeah, and are you going to get a wealthy person to give you a lot of money for your organization and your program and come and teach a class or volunteer or hand out food? Probably not. Yeah, it's not very likely. There are a few that will. But more than likely, you're not going to get that. But you've got funding to keep your doors open. So those are good connections to have. Also, media partners. And so having two anchors there, and I know AY Magazine was sponsoring, and they sponsor every year, but having it more normalized in the media and taking away that stigma of what recovery looks like, what people in recovery look like. Because the majority of people there, you wouldn't even know if they had been in recovery or not. For all I know, everybody was in recovery there. I don't know. It was a little embarrassing that my jacket was so gaudy, but, well, thanks for listening to me rant about, really nice events that I was invited to, and the lessons I learned and how I felt like I come up short, again. And so, yeah. Well, until next time, excuse me, I'm going to go buy a new jacket.